and good evening or afternoon, depending of where you are in Africa and in the world. Welcome to your favorite program, 1 Hour With, a talk show who brings you the best of the industry and all development around the African Union agenda and the free trade agreement. So today we have the pleasure to receive online Mr. Peter Varndell, who's the Chief Executive at the NEPAD Business Foundation, called for the people called the NBF, who will enlighten us and tell us about their institution and what are the different challenge and opportunity toward the corridor, the infrastructure, and other element of the journey, this journey. So I will first welcome him because he's online, and I know that he's a very busy person. So I will say hello, Mr. Peter. How are you?
Panga, thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be with you on your show, and welcome to everybody that has an interest in this topic.
Yes, thank you. So this is it was a 6-episode series dedicated to how unlocking the African trade potential. So today we have you, and this is our last episode of the series, and thank you for your time and commitment to participate to this program. So before we start, I would like the people, our listeners, our audience, to have the occasion to understand what is your organization about, what you're doing, and what is your positioning according to all those change in terms of how we unlock African trade during these beautiful times.
No, thanks, Tanga. So as an organization, the NEPAD Business Foundation, we're just over 2 decades old, formed very much as a direct response of the African Union creating the NEPAD initiative. And the call for us was to see how we could mobilize business to support the goals and objectives of the NEPAD initiative. And in many ways, what our initial mantra was at the beginning, it still remains the same 20 years later. We want to see how we can support governments with their priorities by mobilizing private sector resources. What that means is we very strongly believe in the concept of political will, and we want to support governments with things that they expressly state as their priorities, but importantly, put the lens on them and focus on those activities that have an interest to business, either in terms of creating opportunities or in terms of managing business operational risks. So that's who we are. We have relationships with the key organizations, continental and regional organizations. We also work at a very grassroots level with project sponsors. So we work all the way from AU through to local municipalities, depending on where the project sponsor is that we need to be aligning with and supporting. So that's our high-level mantra. And then we really look to play a catalytic role. A lot of the work that we're involved in is the responsibility of governments, but our stakeholders, who are typically infrastructure, the needers of infrastructure, so let's call them the owners of cargo, the people developing and selling products and goods, those are the people that we are interested in working with to ensure that they can be more effective and grow their businesses. So we focus around a couple of key areas, and being trade facilitation. We focus on the climate change and green economy, and we focus on digital transition. But for the purpose of today's discussion, I think this is very much around trade facilitation. And our role in this space has always been to recognize that we're trying to grow the economy generally. And within a regional context, the way to achieve that is recognizing that the costs of trade across the continent are high, and they are typically influenced by high transport costs and related non-tariff barriers. So that's always been our focus, to see how can we influence transport efficiency through infrastructure interventions and through trade interventions that will ultimately result in lowering the cost of trade, which will mean that consumers can afford more, it will mean that businesses can sell more, and we can lead to a more prosperous Africa. But that's really been our focus in this space.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for that, and give us a good overview of what you're doing. That is very important for us and our audience to understand what you do, so that maybe many government can contact you and see what you can do together. So I wanted to know, how does the NBF identify the most critical infrastructure project needed, aligning with the intra-African connections? How do you identify which one is a priority?
Well, look, there's a lot going on. As you say, it's a busy space. There's a lot of infrastructure projects across the continent. So let me just share with you how one of our focus areas has been the North-South corridor. And how we landed at that was, ultimately we're looking to support the outer NEPAD initiative. And we spent a lot of time up front looking at what they call the Peter Plan, the Priority Infrastructure Development, or Priority Infrastructure, I forget exactly what the acronym is, but it's all the priority infrastructure projects across Africa. Those in our mind were projects that had political support. They were key from a regional and continental point of view. And so we started there. We spent a lot of time going mainly across East and Southern Africa to look at various projects, to understand where they were at, what their challenges may be in terms of becoming realities, and really looking for projects where we could play a role that would be additional and play some value. So within that space, where we landed is we saw a lot of value in the rail space and really wanted to promote road to rail as a high potential opportunity in reducing the cost of trade by bringing efficiencies in, particularly for long haul, high volume commodities. And when we started having that lens, we landed the North-South corridor, not simply because it was a rail project, but more importantly, it was an existing rail project, not requiring necessarily a huge amount of investment as a greenfields project would have, but really could benefit from improving efficiencies and getting more cargo using that rail corridor. So that's the lens that we've taken. So just to summarize again, we very much work within the frameworks that are in place, be it at an AU, a NEPAD level, or at a SADC level, and try to support the project that they see as priorities. But importantly, working with our stakeholders to understand where can we play a role to bring a project to bear that will bring down the cost of trade.
Okay. So as an organization, do you face any challenges? Is it easy? Is it, especially, let's start with the SADC. Is it easy to go in and achieve your objective, or you're facing some challenges? And what are they?
Look, if it was easy, we probably wouldn't exist. And I think that's the whole point, right? Infrastructure projects by nature are difficult. Infrastructure projects involving multiple countries are exceptionally more difficult. So I think the projects themselves are the complexities, not necessarily going in and working with the stakeholders. I think everybody always has a vision of what they would like. It's actually just putting the roots and actually driving the initiatives that will take a particular project forward that are difficult. So we've had our challenges. I think we've got very far in terms of what our expectations were. And that really comes down to the stakeholders really coming on board and being supportive and allowing us the space to support them.
Okay, and let's move forward so that we can touch. I see that you speak about the PPP, facilitate this type of collaboration. What is the vitality and importance of those PPP to achieve those projects for you?
Yes, I always talk very carefully about PPPs because, in the sense of the way that we work as the NEPAD Business Foundation, we talk more about not PPPs as the traditional public-private partnerships, but as collaborations, public-private collaborations. Because the type of people we work with, as I explained earlier, are typically users of infrastructure. They have an interest in securing better support to moving their commodities, and they're not necessarily invested in the infrastructure project itself. So a lot of ours are collaboration. It's really unlocking the goodwill of business that require transport to be more efficient and lower cost. So that's the one piece of the puzzle. That's where we come in as that enables us to be a catalytic entity to support specific opportunities. And then when you start to talk about traditional PPPs, the reality is for most infrastructure projects, PPPs is a critical mechanism for pulling in the private sector expertise, knowledge, and financing to be able to make these projects a reality. So typically we would use public-private collaborations and our stakeholders and our partnerships to be able to drive towards preparing bankable PPPs that can be financed by private market.
So what are the I will see the key the most important element to make sure that such partnership works for you?
So what we've seen, in particular in cross-border projects, what often happens is the default is to set up a perfect institutional structure before people even start to look at what the project and the dynamics of it are. So that's a space that we've tried to play in, to recognize that it takes a very, very long time to negotiate cross-border institutional arrangements. But rather, let's work through less, let's just say, less intensive arrangements, but at least to start get the projects moving to demonstrate that there actually is a project to be done. So that's typically where we've played is that catalytic role to mobilize funds, project development support to start developing the transactions from an early conceptual level through pre-feasibility level. And through that, you start to inform, is it a good transaction? What are the real institutional requirements that need to be put in place to deliver it? So that's kind of where we try to play as a catalytic force, just to get things moving, with the understanding that ultimately you'll have a perfect institutional structure that will need to own and push forward the transaction that you're involved in.
Do you have any specific recipe to make, because we know that it's very difficult most of the time for public and private to join a venture due to, they speak about fraud, corruptions and stuff. What is your secret recipe to make sure that we have that partnership work and be effective?
Yeah, the secret recipe is always common interest and a need. So like I say, if something's happening and it's going to be done anyway, then we're not required. But what we really try to find is this common interest between what government are trying to achieve and what business as a whole needs for any to grow an opportunity or to manage a risk. Once you find that common interest, and with common interest will come trust. With common interest and trust becomes clarity of what needs to be done to be able to push things forward, and actually to put some activities and some effort into closing those specific activities that will push forward. So, just going back to answer your question, it's that common interest and trust that you have a common vision are the real points of departure. Everything else flows from there. The rest is really mechanical in many ways.
Okay, so let's move on and speak about the North-South Corridor Rail project. We know that you provide leadership on the North on that project. Can you explain the strategy, importance of this particular corridor for trade with the SADC region and beyond? And maybe also tell us what goods or sector benefit will mostly take advantage of it.
Yeah, so generally, if you look at Southern Africa as a block, the most active, highest volume corridor is the North-South corridor. In our context, it's a corridor that runs from South Africa all the way through to DRC. It involves 6 countries. From a rail perspective, it involves 7 different rail operators, all who need to cooperate to move a single item from A to B. So it is a very complex project, but it is a high volume corridor. And in our view, the North-South Corridor Rail has always been underutilized. It's an existing railway line. It has capacity available to move goods. And it is a huge opportunity to reduce the cost of trade and also make logistics easier for customers, the right customers, obviously. So that is always our point of departure. The reality, I guess, was just getting, with cross-border projects, the hard part is always just having a champion that is able to lead everybody on what they're trying to achieve. So I guess this project just lacked the independent party to be able to sit in the middle and just convene people around a common vision. And that was our role. We got involved, just trying to really understand from the various countries and their rail operators about what their aspirations were, where the challenges were, to try and move the North-South corridor forward as a critical rail corridor that could reduce the cost of trade in our region. Um, and then flowing from that, many things have been done, from having an agreement between the various rail operators and ourselves that start to find the common direction of what they're trying to achieve. From that, we were able to get ministerial support. So we took it through the SADC structures and had it endorsed by the Ministers of Transport at a SADC level as a priority rail project for the region. What that meant, the gap was the project preparation of what the transaction should look like and what the future vision should look like. So we were very fortunate with having that mandate, having that support from all the stakeholders to approach the SADC PPDF fund managed by the DBSA to get funds to start do the pre-feasibility work. So we could really start to understand what customers wanted, customers needed, what the status quo was, what the target volumes, target customers would be for an expanded North-South rail corridor operation. And then off the back of that, to start to respond to supply chain solutions, recognizing multimodal requirements, and then recognizing what infrastructure requirements were needed from a rail point of view. And then most importantly, to understand, within the target commodities, what equipment you needed to do to deliver that. So looking at the rolling stock requirements, looking at the wagon requirements to be able to service those customers that had an interest in using rail. And all of this was done, through a centralized structure where, we were able to do some of the heavy lifting on behalf of the rail operators, with them being there to be able to take the critical decisions as the project proceeded. And then the project's run through its phases. So, we finished the first phase, and then we're fortunate to get some support from the World Bank to do the next phase of the feasibility structuring, and that's where we were last involved in the project.
Yeah, I can say you guys learned a lot by pulling up those 7 railway. I wanted to find out, is it not also maybe a signal to go toward more inclusive cooperation as a African railway, so that we can avoid all those technicality and all those delay? Because I believe that if we have a Pan-African structure who can unify those under one umbrella, we can get in time. I want to have your opinion on that.
Yes, I always talk from the context of what we've been involved in, right? So that's the dream. The vision is always to have a single connected railway line where any train can start somewhere and run to somewhere. The reality is, rail is a very sovereign service provision. So it's a journey towards getting to the position where a single operator can run a train all the way through. And in the meantime, you've got to work within the context of what is possible. So that then means that you need to fully understand how you can use each different rail operator to be able to move that box from one place to the next across multiple borders. So you're absolutely right. There's this vision of a fully connected railway network, which any rail operator can essentially start to move through. We're not there yet. In South Africa, we've got to move in that direction around third-party access. And that will be the vision ultimately of the North-South Rail Corridor as well, to have a third-party rail access opportunity in the event that that hasn't been serviced by the rail operators themselves.
So we also find out that to achieve such a project, you need a lot of stakeholders. So I would like to find out from you, how much are they important, and how necessary you guys need to maintain those good relations. So how crucial is effective stakeholder engagement for the success of and sustainability of those infrastructure projects? How important are they?
Critical. And I don't think what people appreciate is how many stakeholders are actually involved. From a government point of view, you've got the the regional bodies, the AU, the outer NEPADs, the SADC, are playing a critical role from a political point of view in terms of aligning what cross-border projects look like, cascading down to local government, their transport ministries, their rail operators that have the mandate to actually deliver the service, and so that's the person you actually need to work with to make things happen. That's the government side. Then on the private sector side, there's a whole series of stakeholders again, starting with the users of the service, the customer owner, the cargo owners, that you really need to understand what their needs are, what they're supporting, what they would use. So it's a very key stakeholder. If you don't get that right, it doesn't matter what you do, you'll develop something that can't be used. To the financiers and the developers that will be involved on the private sector side. And then very importantly, the DFIs play a massive role in terms of being catalytic and supporting the work required to drive some of these projects, which are risky in nature. You're dealing across multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries, multiple legal systems. And without the support of DFIs, I think these will be very risky transactions to take forward and difficult to do. So all of those bodies generally need to be involved in this type of cross-border work.
Okay, but is there a strategy or something more effective to make sure, or is just what you just defined? Yeah.
Look, so the bigger regional blocks have a very key role to play. So your AU, your outer NEPADs, your SADCs have a very key role to play, and they have quite large strategies. We probably, from our point of view, a little bit more selective about where we work. So we're a relatively small organization. Our role is quite small. So we look for things that we feel that we can influence, and we stick with those. So, we started with the North-South Corridor Rail. We haven't gone far from that. I think we stuck to the North-South Corridor. We stuck with the concept of supporting transport corridors. We still stick to the concept of supporting road to rail. The only expansion that we've done is to say, okay, within that same set of stakeholders, how do we do more work on the road side as well in the short term? Start to work on the road transport corridors, the border posts and processes that are critical to reduce the cost of trade. So we try to stay quite narrow and consistent, as opposed to taking a very broad strategy and try to be all things to everybody.
Okay, so let's move in terms of the communities. I know you run a lot of projects, most of the projects, and how are we making sure that they benefit the people, the countries, and also the community around those projects?
Yeah, so our role is very much in project development, so project preparation, feasibility studies, transaction advisory work. But from the outset, we've always been aware of this. So in probably going back a few years now, we had a strong look at how can you use infrastructure procurement as a lever for local economic development. So we did some work in the early days, and our view is that procurement is such a strong tool for ensuring that you get local economy benefit from an opportunity point of view, direct opportunity. And the way to do that is to start thinking about as early as possible as you're conceptualizing projects in the pre-feasibility level, in the feasibility level. So you're already starting to think about what local opportunities can be created through the project that can be done locally. And I think some of the examples we got. I was thinking back, in the port space, for example, when we looked at Tanzania. The types of things that came through there, like building a new port or new berth, is very much a global expertise. It's probably going to rely heavily on global partners to come in and do that type of work. But the long-term 20-year operations is a good opportunity for local companies. The cement supply is a good opportunity for local companies as opposed to bringing from international markets. So it's having a very deliberate thought about what the requirements are for the project and what can be shaped through procurement to benefit the local economy. That's the direct side. obviously the indirect side is the economy at large. If we're able to do projects that bring down the cost of trade, it quite simply means that doing cross-border trade will be easier for companies. They can access markets easier at a cost that's competitive. And then so the indirect spin-off is hopefully that we start to stimulate more economic activity generally.
Okay. So, but looking ahead, according to with your experience, what do you think we shall do to make sure to accelerate those processes so that they don't take too long? Those projects basically take sometime 10 years and more. What should we do to accelerate these processes?
Look, as an infrastructure practitioner, I will always say there are no shortcuts. In terms of infrastructure development, it is a process. It requires a lot of preparation and planning, and it requires a lot of detail, a lot of effort. So there are no shortcuts in terms of what you can do there. I think the place where you can start to win is ensuring that you're focusing from the beginning on projects that have the chance of being successful. And then ensuring that as you're going through the life cycle of that project, you're continuously planning for the next phase. Because what we often find is that projects hit these hurdles as they go from one phase to the next, where it becomes moribund for a long period of time, where nothing happens. And then by the time it starts the next phase, you almost have to step backwards again to be able to move forward. So I think it's just trying to be more efficient in terms of picking the right projects that have a good chance of being successful, but then also just to ensure that there's continuous momentum and you're not held up by things in between project phases that will result in a project being stagnant.
So before I let you go, do you have any words or any advice that you would like to share with us?
Look, I think we should be encouraged. This is difficult work, but it's aspirational work. And the opportunity that sits in front of us right now, obviously, is much spoken about, the Afro-Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, as well as the other trade agreements. These are the opportunities that are coming to bear that will result in more trade. But the reality is, in order for those opportunities to be realized, we need to have a very strong focus on the enabling cross-border infrastructure, on the enabling trade facilitation mechanisms, resolving non-tariff barriers and the like. So the opportunity exists. I think the reality is business will need to drive governments on the areas where they think that we need to improve transport, to play a critical role in advocating for where things should be done. And at the same time, government needs to pick up on that, look for partners, realize they're not in it alone. There are people that are prepared to support and open their doors to be able to take support from business and DFIs and donors, and really unlock the goodwill of the broader ecosystem that really wants these opportunities to come to bear, so that we can be more efficient and grow our economies.
Thank you, Peter, for your time, and we hope to have this discussion more in depth in the next series, maybe very soon. Have a good day and the rest of the weekend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate it. All the best.
Thank you. So that was Peter, Chief Executive of the NEPAD Business Foundation. And if you want to ask us any question, you know what to do. You can DM us at Impulse Radio Africa on all our platforms. So for our listener from the diaspora and the continent, and also Afro-descendant, you know what to do. You need to tune on Impulse Radio and television on YouTube and watch our episode. We hope that this episode gave you a lot of in-depth information around how we unlocking the African trade potential. And see you next time.